Okay, I assume I'm streaming. Hello everyone, welcome to CWC Commentary. It's Crazy House World Championship Commentary. Today's game is a match between catask and Bugzilla. Both of them are very strong Crazy House players. And, oh my god. And if you hover over, you can see my scores against each of them. And they are not very good scores. So these are both tough opponents. And okay, we have a d4, d5 setup. What else? Also, catask boasts the highest rating in the candidates field. You can see 2900. I think the second highest rating is 2700, which is Blitzbullet's rating. Well, Bugzilla is also, I think, one of the top 5 by rating. Hello, WDR. Okay, so we have a typical London system. Black plays bishop g4, and white delays developing the knights to play f3 to kick the bishop out, because the pin can be quite annoying sometimes. So instead, the knight will go to h3, and yeah, black develops normally too. Not much is happening right now. But now the opening phase has concluded, and we enter the middle game. So there's some maneuvering, and you have to decide which pieces you want to trade off and which you want to keep. Black, for example, wants to get rid of white's light-scored bishop because one, the knight isn't doing much over here on c6, and this bishop has eyeing a nice diagonal. Also, typically with this pawn structure with pawns on f3 and e3, the long-term plan will be to target e3. Sometimes you want to put the bishop on h6, like he does now. And with bishops on both the light and the dark squares, black's king is going to be really safe at the moment. Black's next plan is going to be to push the c pawn to try to get more pieces to use. Maybe like a pawn on g4 could be interesting. Meanwhile, for white, if white can get a pawn on g5, then this bishop will be a lot less annoying. Hello, everyone. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I keep forgetting about dark mode. But now you can definitely see the board. 1080p, I don't, maybe there's a setting for that. Okay. Yep, so white played g5, pawn at g5 here. Got rid of the bishop. And then black puts a pawn here now, so it's another diagonal. Oh, this is a nice move. Bishop eyes this diagonal, and also it's really hard to kick. No, catask seems to be running short on material. What might the next plan be? Okay, opening the diagonal. Also trying to open this f-file. If black takes on g4, white can recapture. So here, there's a choice between f6 and g4, yeah, so catask takes this first and then takes that. If black took on h3, I think white can take on e7, and the resulting trades will favor white. So Bugzilla sets up this pawn fortress, or what do you call it, a barricade. Yeah, actually both sides have decent barricades. This is a 2x4, very literally. More trading. So after this series of trades, now black doesn't have any diags left. So now is a really good time for white to start, or now would be a good time for white to actually try to get into the position. Usually in more closed positions, actually diagonals are more useful than knights. It's like you see the best black puts a knight on h7, which doesn't really have many prospects aside from defense. And then this other knight also, you can't really see a place on the board to drop the knight yet. Meanwhile, white was able to control these dark squares and take advantage of a bunch of weak dark squares. White might be targeting this square next, because this knight can't defend this. Bugzilla? I think he performed very well in the candidates last year. I think he got like third or something. He's a very solid player. I don't know too much about him because he was mostly playing Crazy House when I just started learning the rules. So he's been around for a while. I think he's from Australia, so Janley would know about him. Mugwort would know about him a lot more than I do. Okay, black continues trying to fortify, but this, you can see this barricade is sort of shrinking a bit. It used to be 2x4, now it's a 2x3. And white's slowly managing to get into position. Meanwhile, you can see white's setup from like 20 moves ago is still untouched. So this is a slow grind, but it's very much a two-result game for at least this stage of the game. White says, here, you can take my queen. I don't mind. Because after takes, takes, and takes, black's king is exposed, so black will need to spend a tempo on that. White threatens to drop a knight on d6 at some point. Maybe not now, because black could have, I mean, I don't think this leads anywhere, but this could be scary. Yeah, so now knight at d6, or rook at f8. Well, there are a lot of ideas. Once black takes here, you can see black just doesn't have a way in. This is a characteristic of a lot of positions coming out of d4, d5. Now white forces the trade of more pieces. Black doesn't have any defenders on the board. So now there should be a mate somewhere. Maybe knight here and pawn here. Or white doesn't even need to rush. Yeah. Just make sure that black has no play. Now this is winning. Rook f8, here, queen g7, and black resigns. Okay, now Zilla's turn. Catask plays a6 and d5, which is a less common but still decent opening. I do not know anything about this opening. Oh, and yeah, so this is a modified leaf gambit, except black plays a6, so white can't play the intermediate move bishop b5 check, which we see, which is pretty common in the leaf gambit. Leaf gambit, by the way, is you play d5 takes and then e6. Snow White has an extra pawn, but black has a slight lead in development. Long term, white should have an advantage, have the edge, but there could be tactics along the way. I would drop a pawn here, but there are many options. I did check the time zones. It's like morning for Bugzilla, like 8 a.m. So I don't know. If it were me, I would not be very awake. Okay, so now catask has the possibility of dropping a pawn on f4 to distract the bishop, and with this pawn on d4. Could also drop a pawn on. Okay, this is less good. Could also go bishop b4 check first at any time as a possible intermediate move. Yeah, now queen takes, the rook will come to d8. Because black is down a pawn, black has to act quickly in order to make something of the position before white gets to consolidate. So that's what we see here. Queen trade again. Mate puts the bishop on a slightly worse square. Now catask can win this pawn on b2, and if white goes queen c3, then black can take on c2 actually, because it's pinned. So actually this is a really yep, so Bugzilla has to go here, queen takes d2, and then probably rook c1 to defend this pawn. Actually, no, that looks bad. So queen takes b2, probably rook b1, attacking the queen, knight takes c2 check, king b1. Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't see the chat. I think I said earlier though, a6 prevents b5, which is common. Yeah. Okay, now material is equal. But this queen is off sides a bit. Black still has the initiative right now. But if white gets the initiative, scary things can happen. So now b4 is played. It makes sense. Also, you can note this, there's a pin. So white can't play knight d5, for example. Okay, so Bugzilla goes in, so it takes. If black took on f7, then white would be able to take on d7. So king d8 is forced. So fortunately for black, queen takes d7 is not mating. And black really wants to drop a pawn on d2, which is very close to mate. Not quite. Oh, it is so close. Okay. So one possible variation. Oh, you just no fear. Okay. Grabs a bishop. Now he has to go d2. Yeah. Takes. No, he doesn't have to immediately take back. He can also calculate moves like queen takes d1 check. He can drop a rook on f1 first. But okay, he takes it. Takes e5, takes e6. No, he does not take e6. He does. Okay. Yeah, because white can't go knight c5 because the bishop covers it. So that's very useful. Catask give back a queen, but without other pieces, the queen by itself doesn't really do much. So black has the advantage now. It also has the 4 bishops. So now comes the counterattack. So black doesn't really have to address this situation because after takes, that's like a tempo. So there's enough time to start their black's own attack. Now, it would be really nice if black had an extra pawn. He could go pawn at d2, king f1, pawn at e2, king takes, knight at c1, or knight at d4, actually, that's better. But it's missing a pawn for that. So he tries to get knight f3 by drawing away the g pawn. Also, this is a tempo because it attacks the rook, and when it captures the rook, it will be a check. It's already very difficult for white to come up with moves. Yeah, knight c1 or knight f1. That's game. Okay, and that's 2-0. And we are in game 3. So this time catask plays knight f3 instead of knight h3, presumably to play a different opening every single game. That's a very common strategy when you're afraid of your opponent's prep, which I think most people have good prep, so I wouldn't be surprised if people are afraid. Okay, and this is common, so you take on c3 and then you get a knight and you can drop it on e4, and then white has a hard time defending the pawn, but white can put a bishop on e1 and it will cover both of the squares that the knight's attacking. It's a very common pattern, so it's fine. I can also read this chat too, besides Twitch chat. Yeah, it's fine to put the knight on c3 in Crazy House because you have bishop e1 at the end, and you have enough time to cast. In Bug House, it's more scary. Knight with f3, p takes knight to b2. Yeah, you could do that too, but you don't really need the queen that badly. You have a good enough attack without the queen. After knight takes h4, you'll be giving white an extra tempo to defend with. So Catask plays king h1, knight g1, which makes the king really safe now. Both you have extra coverage of the h3 square, and also the dark squares are covered. Pawn at f6 is better than sac. Maybe. I think you could still win the queen on h4 though. This is from the previous game. Yeah, knight on c3 versus knight on d2. This knight's going to be a lot more active, and you're not really too worried about losing a pawn in Crazy House because you can defend it easily. Your opponent's not going to get extra knights to the point that it becomes a nuisance. Catask drops the knight on h5. This is a common square for the knight. So we'll have a fight over the dark squares, it seems. So trade off that bishop. Next, this bishop is getting targeted. So you can see the knights on light squares control dark squares. Also, these pawns on dark squares also control dark squares. And then Catask puts the bishop on h2 to make sure that he's always safe, and allows him to push g4 because this bishop's covering the dark square. Now probably next move will be f5. Okay. Or in the future. Or g5. Somewhere along the way, white can get an extra pawn. Actually, g5 makes more sense. And then if you get a pawn, you can start thinking about dropping him like f6 and h6. And the chat just really points out, yeah, rook takes b7, rook takes, knight takes c6 will win a pawn. So it's a possibility. If I rook takes b7, maybe there's knight takes d4 or something. Knight h4? No, this doesn't really feel like it does anything. Okay, so Bugzilla repositions the knight to f5. But white can take it, take g7, I feel. No, it looks really, really appetizing. Okay, Catask brings another knight to eye some more dark squares. So, not too worried about this knight because it's not doing much. Knight takes g7 is definitely losing though. Okay, this is a desperation move to get play. Drops the bishop on the light square, which I don't think is too good because Catask is trying to get in on the dark squares. If takes, then pawn at g3. But that's not so scary. Queen takes, and then knight takes, king takes even. And black only has a queen to work with, so like the previous game, if you have a queen but you don't have any pieces to help the queen, it's not really that easy to get an attack. And here, Catask can continue attacking because Bugzilla just doesn't have any means of getting in. So yeah, oftentimes whenever you see a knight on g7, you think of it as a friend because it's defending the king, it's not really attacking the king, and in order for white to get more out of the position, white has to spend a tempo moving the knight. But Bugzilla snaps it off right away, hoping to get a counterattack, but This knight covers h2, so this knight holds everything together. So now he's lost. In the chat I read, catask is good at, yeah. This is actually my preferred playstyle too, when it works. Trying to deprive the opponent of play and chances, but also maybe he's just playing well. But yeah, this is sort of the type of game that you would expect from a d4, d5 position. It's gonna be slow, sort of grindy. And the way an advantage builds up is pretty slow, but when you get something, then all of a sudden you're just winning. If you get like a foot in the door. And if you are attacking and you have the initiative, it's sometimes you just get a free game and your opponent can't do anything at all, like in this case. We'll also note catask is a minute up on the clock, so that could have it could influence the way the games are going too. Okay, now he switches to knight f6, so this is the fourth opening out of 4 games. This is a common opening in Crazy House. I haven't seen knight takes c3 before. So catask allows bishop takes f7, which So now Bugzilla could try like a pawn at e6. If bishop takes, the knight at g5 will win the bishop. If king takes, then never mind. Yeah, it looks suspicious. If this has theory, then I don't know it. So Bugzilla tries to drive this bishop away because it's defending the f7 square so that he can put a knight and gets things going. But does he even have enough to mate after bishop takes c2? So bishop takes, knight at g5 check, king goes to e8, pawn f7 check, king goes to d7, queen d5 check, you drop a knight, queen e6 check, you go king c6. So maybe bishop takes c2 is actually totally fine here. And that's probably what catask is calculating. This is the sort of situation that if you played a lot of Buckhouse, you would probably not even consider a move like this because it allows white to get into position. But in Crazy House, you can get into situations where you're a pawn short. And because you're a pawn short, all of a sudden, instead of being winning, you're just losing. Okay, the task goes for bishop f5, which blocks this file, so white can't ever drop a knight check. Now, possible idea is going to be pawn at g6, but it's not going to work. So some people in the chat are suggesting g4, but after knight at e5, I don't really see how you make progress. So with, like, there's two ideas. You could drop a pawn on e4, you could drop a pawn on g4, try to drive this bishop away, but black has a knight e5 intermediate move. So what else can white do? White drops a knight on e3 to protect this pawn. But now that the knight's on e3, it can't ever move to these two squares easily. So now black should be able to retreat the bishop to e6 at some point if they want to. Also, maybe the idea was to go take, 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 but that doesn't work either because the d1 square is left open. Now catask can play like g6 and be fine. Either one of these moves. Probably g6 makes more sense. Okay, or king g8. Also a good move. Oh, hello, train flipping. Oh, missed one chat message. Yeah, catask. I don't think catask wants a score that doesn't sound like 10-0. Although this position, white seems to be doing all right. So the material count is 1 pawn to 1 knight. So black's up in material, but and has practically consolidated, but white has good compensation. I think he's forced to go queen h4 here. And black doesn't have a diagonal, so it's hard to attack the queen. So now bishop takes f7 is probably, oh no. Oh, White has better developments. Oh, catask is down to 10 seconds. Down to below 20. Well, Bugzilla is up on time. This is actually very different from the first 3 games where Bugzilla was down a significant amount of time. You see, catask put all the pieces next to his king. Meanwhile, this rook has not been activated yet. h6, trading a pawn. Maybe you can even take this one and then drop a pawn on h6 and g7 to win the rook. Chooses not to. This could be a mistake later on. Now, this is a nice move because after hg, you can take on f3 with check. So now white actually loses the pawn. We can win this one back, but without the pawn hook h6, then Bugzilla just doesn't have a way into the position once again. And now bishop at g5 will fork the queen and the knight. And I think catask will win this game. So once again, we can see whose king is safer. This king is surrounded by these pieces, whereas this king only has 3 pawns. Well, this is a time scramble, so it could actually go either way. If both players had a minute on the clock to think, I think black wins this. Bishop takes f7. Where are you on this? And at g5, let's meet. Well, he's lost all 4 games. I think Bugzilla was pretty close to having good chances in the last game. So if he keeps this up, he could win one of his 3 remaining games this fight. Okay, we get a new opening. Catask, instead of playing bishop f4, now plays bishop g5. So black plays this h6 g5 fan shadow setup, which is a common opening. I think the finisher plays it a lot. Much like normal chess, a common way to attack this pawn structure is to go h4. Try to dislodge it or weaken it, like maybe if the pawn pushes, you could drop a new piece on g5. When you look at the colors, it seems like white will probably be wanting to play on the dark squares, or even the light squares. Whereas black definitely wants to play on the light squares, but it also wants to control the dark squares to make sure white doesn't get too much play. White delays castling. I mean, it might be a bit scary to castle knowing there's a pawn on g4, so you don't really need to castle in crazy house, honest, 100% of the time. If the center opens up, then it's probably better to castle so your king doesn't get exposed. But if the sides or the flanks are more open, then I don't need to castle. Okay, so white plays bishop b5 check. If black plays c6 here, then that would open the c7 square for the knight. So this is more or less forced if black doesn't want to trade bishops. One of the threats that black has in this position is to take on f4 and then take on d4, winning a pawn. And white can't take back because of knight takes c2, and this is a fork. Bugzilla does not go for this. I do not like this, actually, because now white can actually probably castle kingside and have this open f file for the rook after defending this pawn. Thank you for watching, guys. Bugzilla avoided option. Well, if he can't, then that's actually really bad for like all the people lower rated than him, which is like most of the field. So in some cases, if let's say we remove these 2 bishops from the game, then white could drop a knight on e6 or on g6 because there's a pin. So we can somehow get those bishops out of the way. Then white's doing fine. Something that catask could consider like bishop takes c7, followed by rook takes f5. No, not rook, followed by rook and mate. Some knight check. Maybe a knight check followed by bishop takes. Okay, so opts for knight at h5, which makes sense. It's trying to trade off this strong defender. A lot of time in castle positions, this f2 pawn actually becomes really annoying because it blocks the rook and the king from, let's say, escaping. So having the pawn on g3 is actually very helpful for white. So now white could take on f5 and then drop another knight on h5. Once again, catask is in time trouble. Let's check his connection real fast. Okay. So white delays knight at h5 probably because it's always going to be there. And also because after knight at h5, king moves, take, whatever, black's going to get more pieces to work with. So with low time, he doesn't want to calculate everything. So opts for the safer continuation. Point of bishop on c5 is that it's going to target this pawn. So it's essentially fighting for the dark squares. After takes, pawn at g5, for example, white can continue fighting. Oh, this is a nice move. They have trades, and he helps bring this knight on e2 into the game. Yep, and now takes, and knight at h5. The material win over here is not so influential to the position because it's not near the king. It's pretty far away from both kings. But this is right next to black's king, so this is very, very already looking very good for white. If he has to go look at h2, takes a knight at e4 to defend the position, but he knows things are going wrong. Knight at e4, and takes. And the point of knight at e4 is because white's starting to go knight at h5, which would win this knight, so you're going to be able to defend it. Although, he's going for the attack instead. And he wants to go queen takes h4. But I don't think this is actually going to work. So now catask is looking for mate. When he sees he doesn't actually have a forced mate, he can just take this knight instead and still have a really good position. Catask is blocking with a knight because if he blocks with a pawn, then black will be able to take and drop the pawn on h2, which is really annoying. But there's a lot less that can be done with a knight. Now pawn at g7 is crushing. Knight f6, knight h7, knight h5, bishop here, knight takes d5, bishop f6. Oh, oops, this is faster. The score is now 5-0. What will catask play this time? Okay, plays a6. Bugzilla switches up the opening. So now we have six. We have our 6th opening out of 6 games. This is very similar to game 2. So since knight d5 is 2, so black's down a pawn once again, so knight moves like knight d5 would be really slow. So knight g4 with the idea knight takes f2 is a bit forced. Although this is a really nice move, it tries to distract the bishop. And now instead of taking the knight, white can even consider capturing the bishop and the pawn. Oh, probably this is more prudent. Actually, no, neither of these. Maybe queen of 3 here. Could be interesting. I also have catask in the chat, so if you type, I think /W before whatever you want to type, then it shows up in the spectator room instead of the actual room chat. So now the material count, white has a knight for a pawn, but worse king safety. So it's a balanced game. Although long term white is favored. So now the question will be which side can use their pieces most effectively. c4 is an interesting decision. Really interesting decision. So white wants to counter knight e4 by trying to dislodge the defender of the knight. Although there are already maybe ideas like pawn at g5, knight takes d5, queen takes d5, pawn takes, pawn at f4 check, king e4, knight at f2. And forking the queen. Once again, that's pawn at g5, knight takes, pawn takes, pawn at f4 check. And the white king can only escape to a light square after that, so black will be able to fork and win the white queen. Although whether or not it works is unclear. Test plays pawn on g3 to give the knight f2 after white takes on d5. And this is looking pretty bad for black, actually. For example, takes knight f2 and white can go queen b3 and try to get something on e6. Or perhaps queen e1. Queen a4, which makes sense because after it takes, now white can always recapture with check. Now black tries to win the knight, but after it takes, take e2. Black doesn't have a check to give. Queen takes, black will be forced to drop the pawn there. Unless he wants to be more ambitious. So he takes this. Oh, hey, platypus. I would have wanted to take it on c6 earlier, but it seems okay. So the idea is white's threatening pawn at d7, which is actually really nasty. And if takes, white wants to drop something on f7, and if king takes, knight at e5 check. Now if king e7, after, let's say okay, so pawn takes e6, pawn at f7, king e7. And there's knight at g8 ideas. So black opts for taking it with the rook. But still, it's going to be really annoying to defend. White can go king d2, try to shield himself from all the checks. Knight at e4 is probably forced. Oh, it's not? This is a nice move. So black won the bishop magically. Now he's going to win the queen. Wow, he got out of that one. Queen at c8. Because of rook at c8, now white doesn't have the option of queen takes d7. So now black can go like knight at e4. And then if king c2, knight b4 check, and then queen at, oh yeah, there's multiple mates. He shouldn't have won that, but that shows you the power of catask. You can turn losing positions around. Ah, the rook is useless. I think it could have been put on like f6 or something, or e7 or d7 as a defensive piece. Oh, unless it's the rook on h1, then yeah, that's useless. Okay, once again we have a new opening. So Bugzilla plays a normal Vian shadow system. Instead of the pawns being on g5, it's on g6. So a typical way to attack this structure is to try to sack on g6 or pressure the light squares, or to pressure the dark squares. In this case, it seems easier to pressure the light squares because white traded off the knight that was controlling the dark square, or that was controlling the light squares. So h4 makes sense. And h5 is a logical continuation. Knight takes g5, wow. So he sacks this queen, but of course he probably don't want to take that because white can now get all these light squares. So what's the overall exchange? So you can see white sacks a queen and a knight for 2 pawns and a bishop. So Bugzilla has the material advantage, but catask has the attack. And you can see these light squares are very weak. It's going to be very hard to defend this. Ooh. Although, with imprecise play from white, this could still be holdable. So that's the thing, right? What's white's plan? White wants to go like pawn at g6, pawn at h7, maybe bishop at e6 to try to get a rook. White has a lot of options here. Yes, white goes here, knight takes, and pawn at h7 is an intermediate move. Or pawn at g6 is the intermediate move. Or just not needed, because pawn at g6 will win the rook anyways. So at some point, Bugzilla will have to give away a lot of material to try to get some counterplay. It's now pawn at g6, or even knight at d8 actually. Defending the knight and attacking the rook. Or pawn at h7 followed by knight at d8. This is a threat now. Yeah, pawn h7, rook takes, bishop takes, king takes, pawn g6. And now if king h8, white has knight f7. So black has to go king g8. Now white has rook e8. And then bishop at f8, rook takes, knight takes. Oh, that doesn't work. Ha. Oh, okay, white still has rook e8, bishop f8, and then knight takes. That doesn't work either. Okay, something's gotta work. Rook at e8, something at f8, and then knight takes d5 with the threat of like pawn h7, knight f7. You can get a knight that takes d5 at some point. It's going to be really strong here. Also notice this whole game, this king is so safe. Black was not able to get into this position at all. Yeah, so it's going to take, but all of a sudden this square on g7 is open now. Oh. Ah, that is nice. If king takes, white goes knight at e6, and that's checkmate. That's actually a threat right now. The other threat is rook g8. So now rook takes d8, and rook at h7 is a threat, and then knight at e6. Oh, that's very nice. This is his last chance, but yeah, see, without any board presence on this upper half of the board, black cannot do anything. Yeah, rook and rook f8, pawn e7 and knight h7, but the knight, that's what Fox suggested, but the knight on f8 that captures the rook will cover h7. So after a pawn at h7, black can go knight takes h7. That was like the one drawback of that line. Okay, new opening number 7. Knight f6, knight c6. This is a very common line. Chicken crossroad plays this a lot in Bughouse. The idea is you are willing to give up the knight for the pawn because this pawn on f6 is going to be very good at controlling these squares. So because of this, white doesn't take. And usually the knight ends up on e4. And we get a normal French-like structure. Okay. So after a long think, catask plays a6. Kicking the bishop from this annoying pin, so now he can redeploy his bishop to maybe like f5 or g4. This would make sense because he wants to defend this piece. Unless he wants to just take on c3 and go bishop g4, that's also an option. He goes for bishop f5, very logical. So a lot of times with French structures, oh, and he goes for e6. Does this work? A lot of times with French structures, the bishop will be on the inside of the pawn chain. So here with the bishop outside the pawn chain, it's better, especially when you have a6 here. So white doesn't even get to take advantage of this pin. So Bugzilla seizes the chance to play e6, which looks interesting. I don't think it works. It looks interesting. So catask tries to reset the position a bit. This bishop will actually stay on e6 because it's actually going to d5, not on this diagonal. So he goes bishop at e4, but now this allows white an extra tempo. Oh, I guess this was already a tempo on this bishop. This bishop is very awkwardly placed because it blocks the pawn. And also you never want to have to recapture this. So now white can actually go knight takes e6, queen takes, and knight g5, which would win the f7 pawn. I mean, that Rook f8 variation, he spent like a minute on it. Okay, so h6 will protect the g5 square, so white can't actually go take knight g5. So white instead takes on e4, and goes bishop b7 to win this pawn on c6. So actually the choice isn't between the rook and the pawn, the choice is between this pawn and the knight, so he has to sack his queen to avoid that. But now things are starting to look dire for catask. First of all, he probably can't move his rook as much as you'd like to, because the queen could be, if you miss a rook up, the queen can drop on like a8 or something. And the idea here is that after blocks, you can take and take. And also it opens up the 8th rank for pieces to promote. So now queen at a8 is a really strong threat. Oh, it can be blocked by bishop at c8. Now white wins this knight. Or this pawn. So a lot of pieces on prey. So one of the things is sometimes in Crazy House you can see hanging pieces and people don't capture them and you wonder why. Well, okay, let's say I capture this piece. Well, all of a sudden black gets to drop bishop on d5. And black suddenly retains initiative. And this is a queen, by the way. This is not a pawn. So you wouldn't want to lose. Although he does go for it, and now we see like now this is a bit safer for black. So black might have lost a piece, but there's some king safety here. Bugzilla doesn't take the pawn. No, maybe in the end it's okay. So now knight takes g5 is really strong. Because black can't recapture. Bishop at e5, so a single knight takes, or he has to drop a pawn here. If he drops a pawn here, then he can probably... Oh, this is cute. He can't defend the knight because he only has a knight to block with. Okay, this is pretty much over. Knight at h5, queen takes g5, pawn. And Bugzilla is on the board. That's a nice game from Bugzilla. 3 queens minimum need to be catask. Yeah, well, he got them. Okay, now we get a staple of Crazy House. This is a very common opening. I just don't know any theory here. But h4 is, I guess, not so common. So bishop c5 instead of bishop e7 in the opening is actually a forced loss, which is really surprising because it's pretty early into the opening. But there are games where people have beaten Stockfish for playing bishop c5. Catask goes for the queenside castle. With not so much material on the board, the king will be easier to defend than this one, and plus he has an open file now to work with. But the way to get into this position is to try to drop a diagonally. Try to attack the dark squares, essentially. So the idea of this rook lift was just to defend this pawn. Nothing too special there. Bugzilla now threatens to go knight e2 check. Or just knight e2 in general. Although if you go with this knight, then white can take on f4. Maybe I want to go with the knight you take. Okay. Now, one long-term concern is that if black, for example, takes the rook and takes some more pieces and trade stuff, this king will actually be more vulnerable than this king. Still impossible to beat Stockfish against bishop c5. Wait, isn't there that one line? I don't remember. There was like a queen sack. Okay, maybe not. Might be thinking of a different line. My version of possible is like if there exists one game that works, that it'll work overall. An interesting idea here might actually be to just ignore the queen. Because after takes, what else do you have to work with? Okay, it's probably a bad idea. I'm just looking at lines like bishop takes f4, knight takes c3, pawn takes. Okay, so he opts to part with the queen this way. Yeah. So the idea is sort of like after takes, knight takes, you have like rook takes g7 ideas because now they have 5 squares open because this knight that was defending the f5 square got traded off. So there's also catask's idea. Now, whether or not it works, I'm not so sure. Okay, this can't be good. Material-wise, Bugzilla has a queen and a rook. So since he has more heavies, he's going to try to infiltrate the back rank. But catask has a ton of pieces. So surely there must be some way to get into the position. And since catask has all 4 bishops and 3 knights, can even spend some of the pieces on defense. So we see here, not even a need to drop something here. This is an annoying move to face because catask will try to win this pawn on d4, and after the pawn on d4 falls, black has nothing. So once again, you can see there's white's gradually trying to remove black's play. So that's why Bugzilla takes the bishop, because he at least wants to keep a semblance of attack or initiative. So here, catask is threatening the mate, actually. Maybe I'll see that. So the idea is he wants to go queen at h8, king takes, pawn takes g7, and then he has 2 knights. He'll get the pawn from here. He can set up the very common 2 knight and pawn checkmate. Assuming it works. I didn't actually calculate that far. Haha. I think it should work. So this is pretty annoying to contend with. Yeah, so Bugzilla takes, but also, actually, no, pawn at g7 is really annoying. Because as you can defend this. So queen takes d4 turned out to work, but I think knight takes rook was a mistake. So is this the last game? Yes, this is the last game actually. Someone once said all good things must come to an end. But we will get to see a lot more of these two players in future rounds of the CWC. And we end on a common opening. F3 is common because black doesn't have a pawn to drop on f2. That's the only reason this works. You should not push your f-pawns in general. But you can in this type of situation. And what happens usually is white will win the knight in exchange for pawn, have a hole here. But I think overall have a decently pleasant position. All black has some good compensation because of the lack of coordination of white's knights once he places all three of them on the board. So I think what I've seen before from a Bugzilla match was to put a knight on e3, though I'm not sure of the purpose. I still goes knight h3. I think also sometimes the knight goes to g3. However, here, okay, queen h4, so white can't really block with a pawn, white has to block with a knight. So he chooses to put them in on f2. And now white threatens to trap the queen with bishop g5. It's hard to continue here. Maybe h6 is forced. But white actually has two ways of kicking the queen. Okay, so catask goes for a6. So he says, okay, I'll give away my queen. And he doesn't really need his queen, actually. Because his king is pretty safe. These bishops do a good job of defending key squares. So he tries to get a counterattack this way. Although I don't think he'll get anything out of it after knight e4. Because the king can hide on f1. Ah, this is a nice move. So he gets this knight, and also when he gets this knight is drawn away from the defense of these dark squares. Oh, hello, the truth. So now what? So Katask has four bishops, and he's using them all really well. These bishops point at the white king. Now he drops his knight to win the rook. And probably pushes b6 here. Or drops. So the annoying thing for white is that this bishop is really powerful. It's a really powerful defender, and it prevents white from getting anything in the position. So if white were to somehow get rid of this bishop, I think prospects would look a lot better. So I'm going to say you take my rook, I take your pawn, and your knight's trapped. So I'm going to king walk over later. Now queen at f4, which move was that? True. That did look interesting. Well, anyways, all of a sudden it feels like catask doesn't have too much to work. Oh. So Bugzilla says I'll live, which is slightly suspicious. So now queen at f4. Or not. So we can't win this bishop for free. And also, look, black's king is still very safe here. Black is still very much controlling the game. Can even take on c2 with either piece if he wanted to. Oh, he takes on e2 with the idea knight takes e2, queen takes g5. Oh, this is nice. If he takes here, he forks there. If he takes there, he forks on g4. Knight can even take on g2. Knight goes there, which heals a knight. f2, so queen takes is forced. He wins this knight on g5. Unless he drops a rook here, but now queen at f4 will win the rook. That should be enough for black. So the knight will go to c4 from where it can control the d2 square. And then he can go queen takes, no he can't. Oh, he can. No, queen takes d1 doesn't work. Okay, but he can always regenerate pieces. Oh yeah, look at this king. Oh, hi, Mr. Kushin. Sorry, the command doesn't work because I don't know how to use Streamlabs. I'll figure that out sometime, I guess. But yeah, the task has generated an attack and just keeps going through the whole game, and he wins. So this was Catask Bugzilla. The final score is 9-1 in favor of Catask, and thank you for watching, everyone. In the future, hopefully, if you see me streaming, I'll have Streamlabs working, so then when you type CWC, you can actually see the calendar and stuff, and all the information. But when you click on the test profile, let's say I can do that right now. No, actually, I don't have a layout for that. You click on his profile, and find Crazy House World Championship, and you can find all the information there. It's in the Leech group. Okay, thanks again for watching.